The sky had turned an angry gray without warning that Tuesday afternoon. What had started as a light drizzle quickly became a heavy downpour, sending people scurrying for cover along the busy downtown streets. Among them was Andre, a tall man in his early 30s dressed in a navy blue suit that was quickly becoming soaked despite his best efforts. Andre glanced at his watch and frowned. The interview at the community development office was in 20 minutes and he was still 10 blocks away. The bus had been late, forcing him to walk the remaining distance. His carefully ironed resume was tucked safely in his leather portfolio, but his shoes were already soaked through, and raindrops kept finding their way down his collar. "Just my luck," he muttered, using his portfolio as a makeshift shield against the rain. He had prepared for this interview for weeks. After being laid off from his previous job 3 months ago, this opportunity felt like a lifeline. The position aligned perfectly with his background in urban planning and his passion for community work. Andre quickened his pace, careful to avoid the puddles forming on the uneven sidewalk. People rushed past him, some with umbrellas, others with newspapers or jackets held over their heads. Everyone seemed determined to escape the sudden storm, their faces fixed in identical expressions of discomfort and annoyance. As he approached a bus stop with a small shelter, Andre noticed an elderly woman struggling with several grocery bags. The paper bags were growing darker by the second as the rain soaked through them. One bag had already torn at the bottom, and canned goods were threatening to spill onto the wet pavement. The woman, who must have been in her late 70s, was trying to balance everything while also attempting to keep herself dry under the minimal shelter of the bus stop. Andre slowed his pace. The interview was important, possibly life-changing if he got the job. But something about the woman's struggle made him pause. No one else seemed to notice her difficulty, or if they did, they were too concerned with their own discomfort to offer help. He checked his watch again. 15 minutes until the interview. His mind raced through calculations, how long it would take to help, how much farther he needed to go, whether he could still make it on time. The woman let out a small sound of distress as the bottom of another bag began to give way. That made the decision for him. "Excuse me, ma'am," Andre called out, approaching the bus shelter. "Could I help you with those bags?" The woman looked up startled. Her eyes, pale blue beneath a furrowed brow, regarded him with initial suspicion. She was small in stature, barely reaching Andre's shoulder, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Despite the rain, she was well dressed in a buttoned wool coat and sensible shoes. "Oh," she said after a moment, her expression softening slightly. "These bags aren't holding up very well in this weather, are they?" Andre smiled, setting down his portfolio under the shelter and reaching for the most damaged grocery bag. "These paper bags never stand a chance in the rain. Let me help you rearrange things a bit." The woman hesitated, then nodded with a grateful expression. "That's very kind of you, young man. I wasn't expecting this downpour when I went shopping." Andre quickly assessed the situation, consolidating the groceries into the sturdier bags and cradling the most vulnerable items in his arms. "Are you waiting for the bus, or is your home nearby?" "I live about 6 blocks from here," she replied, gesturing down a side street. "Usually it's an easy walk, but today—" She glanced up at the relentless rain. Andre made a quick calculation. The interview was now just 12 minutes away in the opposite direction. Even if he left now, he'd be late. But leaving this elderly woman to struggle alone through the storm felt wrong in a way he couldn't ignore. "I'm heading that way myself," he said, the lie coming easily. "I'd be happy to help carry these to your door." Relief washed over the woman's face. "Are you sure? I don't want to be a bother." "Not a bother at all," Andre assured her, though he felt a pang of anxiety about the missed opportunity. He'd been searching for a job that matched his qualifications for months. The position at the community development office had seemed perfect. A chance to use his skills to make a real difference in neighborhoods like the one he'd grown up in. But as they started walking, Andre pushed those thoughts aside. The woman introduced herself as Mrs. Wilson, a retired schoolteacher who had lived in the neighborhood for over 40 years. "I taught at Lincoln Elementary for most of my career," she explained as they carefully navigated the wet sidewalk together. "Now I mostly tend to my garden and help with my granddaughter's children when needed." Andre listened, asking questions about her teaching days and the neighborhood's history. The rain continued to pour, but they established a comfortable pace. Mrs. Wilson was more spry than she first appeared, moving with determination despite the weather. "And what about you, young man?" she asked after describing how the neighborhood had changed over the decades. "What brings you out in this dreadful weather?" Andre hesitated before answering truthfully. "I had a job interview, actually." Mrs. Wilson looked concerned. "Oh dear, and here I am taking you out of your way." "It's fine," Andre said, trying to sound more convincing than he felt. "Some things are more important." As they turned onto a quieter residential street lined with older townhomes, Mrs. Wilson studied him with increased interest. "What kind of work do you do?" "I'm an urban planner by training," Andre explained, shifting the groceries in his arms. "I was laid off a few months ago when my company downsized. The interview was for a position at the Westside Community Development Corporation." Mrs. Wilson's eyes lit up with recognition. "Westside CDC? They do wonderful work. My daughter has been involved with them for years." Andre felt a twinge of regret at this connection he'd never get to explore. "They seem like a great organization. I was excited about the possibility." "You said was. Does that mean you're going to miss the interview because of me?" Mrs. Wilson stopped walking, looking genuinely distressed. Andre glanced at his watch and nodded. "It was scheduled for 2:30 and it's 2:28 now. But please don't worry about it. I'm sure other opportunities will come along." Mrs. Wilson frowned. "I feel terrible about this. You stopped to help me, and now it's cost you a chance at a job. Honestly, ma'am, I couldn't have walked past someone who needed help. My grandmother would have had my hide," Andre said with a smile, trying to lighten the moment. "She always said character is what you do when no one's keeping score." Mrs. Wilson studied him for a long moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. Mine used to say that kindness always finds its way back to you, though rarely in the way you'd expect." They continued walking in companionable silence, the rain finally beginning to ease. By the time they reached Mrs. Wilson's townhouse, a well-maintained brick building with flower boxes in the windows, Andre's disappointment about the missed interview had faded somewhat. There was something satisfying about knowing he'd made the right choice, even if it came at a personal cost. "Let me help you get these inside," he offered as Mrs. Wilson unlocked her front door. The interior of the home was warm and inviting, with bookshelves lining the walls and comfortable furniture that looked well used but cared for. Photos of what must be several generations of family members adorned the mantel and side tables. "You can set those on the kitchen counter," Mrs. Wilson directed him, turning on lights as they moved through the house. "Would you like some tea? It's the least I can offer after you've gotten soaked helping me." Andre glanced down at his dripping clothes and chuckled. "I'm afraid I'd ruin your furniture in this state." "Nonsense," Mrs. Wilson waved dismissively. "I've raised 3 children and 5 grandchildren in this house. A little rainwater won't hurt anything." She disappeared into another room, returning with a towel. "Here, dry off a bit. The kettle will be ready in a minute." Against his better judgment, Andre found himself accepting the offer. As Mrs. Wilson busied herself in the kitchen, he took the opportunity to dry his face and hair with the towel. The warm, lived-in atmosphere of the house reminded him of his own grandmother's home, where he'd spent many afternoons after school. "Do you take sugar?" Mrs. Wilson called from the kitchen. "Just a little, thank you," Andre replied, looking at the family photos more closely. One showed a younger Mrs. Wilson in a graduation cap and gown, beaming proudly between what appeared to be her parents. Another featured a middle-aged woman who bore a striking resemblance to Mrs. Wilson, standing in front of a building with Westside Community Development Corporation, clearly visible on the sign. Andre leaned closer to the photo, an odd feeling of coincidence washing over him. "That's my daughter, Catherine," Mrs. Wilson said, returning with 2 steaming mugs of tea. "She's the executive director at Westside CDC now."
"Been there almost 15 years. Andre nearly dropped the towel.
"Your daughter is Catherine Wilson? She's the person who was supposed to interview me today." Mrs. Wilson's eyes widened, then crinkled with amusement. "Well, isn't that something? It seems we were destined to meet today, just not in the way either of us expected." As Andre accepted the mug of tea with slightly shaking hands, he couldn't help but feel that something significant had just happened, though he couldn't yet see what it meant. All he knew was that his day had taken an unexpected turn in Diocese. He ran, and somehow, sitting in this warm kitchen with Mrs. Wilson felt more right than being at that interview would have. What neither of them realized yet was how this chance encounter would completely reshape his future. beginning with a phone call that would come the very next morning. Andre sipped his tea slowly, still processing the incredible coincidence. The warmth of the mug was comforting against his rain-chilled hands. Outside, the downpour had lessened to a gentle patter against the windows, creating a cozy atmosphere in Mrs. Wilson's living room. "So," Mrs. Wilson said, settling into her armchair across from him, "tell me about why you wanted to work at Westside CDC." Andre hesitated, unsure if this was just polite conversation or something more. The missed interview still stung, but there was no sense in dwelling on it now. "I believe in their mission," he answered honestly. "I grew up in a neighborhood not too different from the ones they serve. My mom raised 3 of us on her own, working 2 jobs. Our community center was my second home, a safe place where I could study and stay out of trouble." Mrs. Wilson nodded encouragingly, her eyes attentive. "When I got my urban planning degree, I promised myself I'd work to create more spaces like that," Andre continued, his passion for the subject warming his voice. "Communities need more than just buildings and roads. They need places that bring people together, that offer resources and opportunities." "That's exactly what Catherine, my daughter, believes too," Mrs. Wilson said. "When she took over as director, many people wanted to focus only on housing development. But she insisted on a more holistic approach." Andre leaned forward, his missed interview momentarily forgotten. "That's what impressed me about Westside's recent projects. The mixed-use development on Maple Street isn't just affordable housing. It's got the child care center on the ground floor, the community garden, the skills training program." Mrs. Wilson's face brightened. "You've done your homework." That project was Catherine's baby. "Took 3 years of planning and fighting for permits." "It shows," Andre said. "Most developers would have taken the easy route, build the units, collect the tax credits, and move on. But creating something that actually serves the community in multiple ways, that's harder, but it matters more." The conversation flowed easily after that. Andre found himself explaining his ideas about urban green spaces, about how public transportation could better serve low-income neighborhoods, about community ownership models he'd studied. Mrs. Wilson listened intently, occasionally asking sharp questions that revealed her own deep understanding of community development. "You know," she said during a pause in the conversation, "I taught for 43 years. You develop a sense for people in that time." She studied Andre over the rim of her mug. "You're the real deal." Andre felt a flush of pride at her words. "Thank you. That means a lot." "I'm curious," Mrs. Wilson tilted her head. "What would you have said if Catherine had asked in your interview why you want this particular job? Beyond the mission, I mean." Andre considered the question carefully. "I'd have told her the truth. That I'm tired of designing luxury condos that no one in my old neighborhood could ever afford. That I want my work to matter to people who really need it." He paused, then added with a small smile, "And that I'd work twice as hard as anyone else she might hire because this isn't just a job to me." Mrs. Wilson nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Would you like more tea?" "I should probably get going," Andre said, glancing at his watch. "The rain's letting up and I've taken enough of your time." "Nonsense," Mrs. Wilson insisted, already standing to take his mug. "You helped me through that dreadful rain. The least I can do is make sure you're properly warmed up before you leave." While Mrs. Wilson busied herself in the kitchen, Andre took the opportunity to look more closely at the photos on her shelves. One caught his eye, a much younger Mrs. Wilson standing with a group of people in front of what appeared to be a community center under construction. "That was back in 1978, Mrs. Wilson said, returning with fresh tea. "The Thompson Street Community Center. We fought for 3 years to get that built." "You were involved in community development too?" Andre asked, surprised. Mrs. Wilson handed him the refilled mug. "Oh yes. Teaching was my profession, but community organizing was my passion. Back then, our neighborhood was being torn apart for a highway project. We organized, protested, and eventually got them to change the route and give us funding for that center as compensation." Andre looked at the photo with new appreciation. "So that's where your daughter got her interest in this work." "She grew up attending planning meetings and passing out flyers," Mrs. Wilson chuckled. "Catherine used to say she learned more about civic engagement sitting on my hip at town halls than she ever did in school." For the next hour, Mrs. Wilson shared stories from her decades of community involvement, the victories and defeats, the slow progress of change. The friendships formed in the struggle. Andre listened, occasionally asking questions that revealed his own understanding of the challenges involved in such work. "You know," Mrs. Wilson said, setting down her empty mug, "I still attend the Westside CDC board meetings. Catherine says I keep them honest, remind them of the history and the real people behind their projects." "That's important," Andre agreed. "Too often the people making decisions forget about the actual communities they're supposed to serve." Mrs. Wilson studied him thoughtfully. "My husband Richard, he passed 5 years ago, always said you can tell a person's character by what they do when they think no one's keeping score." She smiled. "He would have liked you, I think." Andre felt oddly touched by this assessment from a man he'd never meet. "He sounds like a wise person." He was, Mrs. Wilson agreed. A postal worker for 37 years, knew every person on his route by name, kept an eye on the elderly, brought packages inside for people who were working. Little things that mattered. As the conversation continued, Andre found himself telling Mrs. Wilson about his own family, his mother who had worked as a hospital aide, his older brother who was now a high school science teacher, his younger sister studying nursing. He spoke of his neighborhood, both its challenges and its tight-knit sense of community. Before he realized it, nearly 3 hours had passed. The rain had stopped completely and evening was approaching. "I really should get going," Andre said, standing reluctantly. "Thank you for the tea and conversation. It's been a pleasure meeting you, Mrs. Wilson." "Please call me Eleanor," she insisted, rising from her chair with the slight stiffness that betrayed her age. "And thank you again for your help today. Not many people would miss a job interview to help an old woman with her groceries." Andre shrugged, slightly embarrassed. It was the right thing to do. As he helped put away the tea mugs, Eleanor moved to a small desk in the corner of the living room and jotted something on a notepad. "Here," she said, tearing off the page and handing it to him. "My phone number. If you don't mind, I'd love to hear how your job search progresses." Andre accepted the paper, touched by her interest. "I'd be happy to keep in touch." At the door, Eleanor surprised him by taking both his hands in hers. "It was no accident that we met today, young man. I believe things happen for a reason, even if we don't see it right away." Andre smiled. "My grandmother would have said the same thing." "Smart woman, your grandmother," Eleanor replied with a wink. "Now get home and dry off properly before you catch cold." As Andre walked down the front steps, the late afternoon sun was breaking through the clouds, creating a golden light that made the rain-washed streets glisten. Despite the missed interview, he felt oddly lighthearted. The connection with Eleanor had been unexpected but somehow significant. He was halfway down the block when he heard Eleanor calling from her doorway. "Andre, I almost forgot to ask. Do you have a business card or something with your contact information?" He walked back and handed her one of the simple cards he'd had printed for his job search. With his name, phone number, and email address. "Perfect," she said, studying it briefly before tucking it into her pocket. You never know when connections might come in handy. With a final wave, Andre continued his journey home. The missed opportunity at Westside CDC still nagged at him, but somehow the disappointment had dulled. Meeting Eleanor had been worth it, regardless of the professional cost. What Andre couldn't know as he walked through the freshly washed streets was that Eleanor Wilson was already formulating a plan. The moment her front door closed, she reached for her phone and dialed a familiar number. "Catherine, it's Mom. I've just had the most interesting afternoon." "Yes, I'm fine, dear. But listen, about that community outreach position you've been trying to fill, I think I may have found someone perfect for it. No, not one of my former students this time. Someone new. Someone who missed his interview with you today because he was helping an old woman in the rain." As the sun set that evening, Andre was updating his job search spreadsheet, marking the Westside CDC position as missed interview, no follow-up possible. He crossed it off his list of prospects with a sigh, unaware that across town, a different kind of meeting was taking place, one where his name was being discussed with great interest by the very people he had hoped to impress. The universe, it seemed, had plans that were just beginning to unfold. Andre woke the next morn into sunlight streaming through his apartment blinds, a stark contrast to yesterday's downpour. He stretched and reached for his phone, surprised to see it was already past 8. After his long walk home from Eleanor's house, he had fallen into a deep, exhausted sleep. His phone showed 3 missed calls from an unknown number and 1 voicemail. Probably another recruiter, he thought. He'd been getting more of those lately, people promising great opportunities that usually turned out to be commission only, sales positions or contract work with no benefits. Andre put the phone down and headed to the kitchen to make coffee. His modest one-bedroom apartment was neat but sparsely furnished. A second-hand couch, a small dining table with 2 chairs, and walls decorated with framed maps of his favorite cities. The place had a temporary feel, as if he was just passing through. As the coffee brewed, he found himself thinking about Eleanor Wilson. There had been something special about their conversation, something that went beyond the coincidence of her daughter being the person who was supposed to interview him. Eleanor had a warmth and wisdom that reminded him of his own grandmother, but also a sharp mind that had clearly influenced her community for decades. The voicemail notification kept blinking on his phone. With a sigh, Andre picked it up and pressed play, expecting another generic recruitment pitch. "Hello, Andre. This is Catherine Wilson from Westside Community Development Corporation." The woman's voice was clear and professional, but with a warmth that echoed her mother's. "I understand you were scheduled for an interview with us yesterday afternoon. My mother explained the circumstances of why you missed it, and I'd like to speak with you about rescheduling. Please call me back at this number at your earliest convenience. Thank you." Andre nearly dropped his coffee mug. He played the message again, making sure he hadn't misheard. Eleanor had actually called her daughter about him, and Catherine Wilson wanted to reschedule the interview. He quickly saved the number and tapped call, then stopped himself. It was still early, and calling back immediately might seem too eager. He should prepare first, refresh his memory on the details of Westside's recent projects. After a quick shower and another cup of coffee, Andre reviewed his research notes on Westside CDC. He had compiled information on their initiatives over the past 5 years, focusing on the innovative aspects of their approach to community development. By 9:30, he felt ready and dialed Catherine Wilson's number. "Westside CDC, Catherine speaking." Her voice was brisk but friendly. "Good morning, Ms. Wilson. This is Andre Thompson returning your call." He tried to keep his voice steady despite his excitement. "Andre, thank you for calling back." There was a smile in her voice now. "I hope you don't mind, but my mother called me last night and told me all about meeting you. It seems you sacrificed your interview with us to help her with her groceries in that terrible rainstorm." "It was nothing, really," Andre said, feeling slightly embarrassed. "Anyone would have done the same." "I'm not so sure about that," Catherine replied. "But regardless, I'd like to offer you another opportunity to interview for the position." "Are you available this afternoon?" Andre quickly checked his schedule, empty except for more job applications, and agreed to a 2 p.m. interview. "Excellent," Catherine said. "And Andre, my mother doesn't usually take such an immediate liking to people. She spoke very highly of you and your ideas about community development. I'm looking forward to our conversation." After they hung up, Andre let out a whoop of delight that probably startled his neighbors. He had a second chance. The missed opportunity hadn't been lost after all. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of preparation. Andre polished his portfolio, printed fresh copies of his resume, and even spent a few minutes standing in front of the mirror, practicing answers to potential interview questions. By 1 p.m. he was ready, dressed in his best suit, now fully dry after yesterday's soaking, his leather portfolio packed with examples of his work. The Westside CDC offices were located in a renovated warehouse building, part of their own neighborhood revitalization project. The reception area featured large photographs of community events and construction projects, along with awards and recognition letters from various organizations. Andre recognized several of the projects from his research. "Andre Thompson for Catherine Wilson," he told the receptionist. A young man with bright eyes and a friendly smile. "She's expecting you," the receptionist said, pointing toward a hallway. "Third door on the left." Andre walked down the hallway, noticing how the space managed to feel both professional and welcoming. Polished concrete floors softened by colorful area rugs, walls painted in warm earth tones, and plenty of natural light streaming through large windows. It felt like a place where serious work happened, but also where community members would feel comfortable visiting. He knocked on the third door, which was partially open. "Come in," called Catherine Wilson's voice. Andre entered to find a comfortably arranged office. Catherine Wilson rose from behind her desk to greet him with a warm handshake. She was younger than he had expected, probably in her mid-40s with the same bright, intelligent eyes as her mother, though her hair was dark with only a few strands of silver. "It's nice to finally meet you, Andre," she said with a smile. "Please have a seat." The interview started conventionally enough, with Catherine asking about Andre's education and previous work experience. He described his urban planning degree, his 3 years at a private development firm, and his growing frustration with projects that prioritized profit over community needs. "That's actually why your organization caught my attention," Andre explained. "Your projects are different. You're not just building housing, you're building communities." Catherine nodded, jotting notes as he spoke. "What specifically about our approach resonates with you?" Andre didn't have to reach for an answer. The integration of services with housing. The Maple Street development is a perfect example. Childcare center on site, community gardens, shared workspaces. You're thinking about how people actually live, not just where they sleep. The conversation flowed easily after that, moving from specific projects to broader philosophies about community development. Andre found himself sharing ideas he had been thinking about for years but had never had the opportunity to implement in his previous job. "We've been considering a new initiative focused on intergenerational programming," Catherine mentioned, leaning forward with interest. "What are your thoughts on bringing seniors and youth together in shared spaces?" Andre's mind immediately went to Eleanor. "I think it's essential," he said. "Our society tends to segregate by age, which means we lose out on valuable knowledge transfer. Seniors have wisdom and time to offer. Young people have energy and fresh perspectives. When designed right, those interactions benefit everyone." Catherine's eyes lit up. "That's exactly what we've been thinking. Mom has been pushing us in this direction for years, actually. She mentioned being involved in community organizing since the 1970s. Andre said. "The Thompson Street Community Center?" Catherine looked surprised. "She told you about that?" "Mom doesn't usually share those stories with people she's just met." Andre shrugged, a little embarrassed. "We had a good conversation. She's easy to talk to." "That she is," Catherine agreed with a fond smile, "and she has a gift for recognizing genuine people. Which brings me to something I wanted to discuss." She leaned back in her chair, studying Andre with a thoughtful expression. "The position you applied for was our standard community liaison role. It's a good job working with residents, gathering input on projects, some basic planning work." Andre nodded, hoping his eagerness for even this entry-level position wasn't too obvious. "But," Catherine continued, "we've also been considering creating a new position, Associate Director of Community Integration. This role would focus on exactly what you were just talking about, ensuring our developments truly serve community needs by integrating services, gathering meaningful feedback, and measuring actual quality of life impacts." Andre tried to keep his expression professional despite his racing heart. "This sounded like a dream position. It would be more responsibility," Catherine added, "but also more opportunity to implement the kind of ideas you've been sharing. Based on your background and our conversation today, and yes, my mother's enthusiastic recommendation, I'd like to consider you for this role instead." I'm very interested," Andre managed to say, his mind already racing with possibilities. Catherine smiled. "Good. The position would start with a 3-month trial period working closely with our team on the River's Edge project. After that, assuming things go well, it would become permanent." They spent the next half hour discussing specifics, salary range, responsibilities, the timeline for the River's Edge development. By the time Andre stood to leave, his head was spinning with excitement and ideas. "One last thing," Catherine said as she walked him to the door. "Mom mentioned you have experience with community gardens." "My grandmother ran one in our neighborhood," Andre explained. "I grew up helping her."
Why do you ask?
"Mom's been trying to start one at her senior living complex, but they need someone with experience to help plan it. She mentioned wanting to recruit you." Catherine's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Just be warned, when Eleanor Wilson gets an idea in her head, He's pretty persistent," Andre laughed. "I'd be happy to help her. It's the least I can do after she went to bat for me like this." "I have a feeling this is the beginning of a productive partnership," Catherine said, extending her hand. "I'll be in touch by Friday with our decision, but I think you can guess which way we're leaning." As Andre left the building and stepped into the bright afternoon sunshine, he couldn't help but smile at the remarkable turn of events. Yesterday, soaked and late for his interview, He had made a split-second decision to help an elderly woman struggling with groceries in the rain. Today, he was walking away with the promise of not just a job, but a position created almost perfectly for his skills and passions, and possibly a new friend in Eleanor Wilson. Sometimes, he thought, the universe works in mysterious ways. Or maybe, as his grandmother would say, kindness has a way of coming back to you when you least expect it. The next morning, Andre couldn't stop smiling as he prepared breakfast in his small kitchen. The interview with Catherine Wilson had gone better than he could have possibly imagined. Not only had he been given a second chance, but he was now being considered for a position that hadn't even existed before, one that seemed tailor-made for his skills and passions. As he sipped his coffee, his phone buzzed with a text message. "Good morning, Andre. This is Eleanor Wilson. I hope you don't mind, but Catherine gave me your number. I was wondering if you might be available to visit the Oak Ridge Senior Living Complex this weekend. The garden committee meets Saturday at 10 a.m. No pressure, just thought you might want to see what we're working with." Andre chuckled to himself. Catherine had warned him that her mother was persistent. He texted back, "Good morning, Eleanor. I'd be happy to join you on Saturday. Just send me the address." Within seconds, his phone buzzed again with the location details and a cheerful, "Looking forward to it." For the rest of the week, Andre found himself in a strange limbo between anxiety and hope. He continued applying for other positions, not wanting to put all his eggs in one basket, but his heart wasn't really in it. The possibility of working at Westside CDC, in a role focused on community integration, kept drawing his thoughts away from other opportunities. By Friday morning, he was checking his phone every few minutes, waiting for Catherine's call. When it finally came, just after lunch, he almost dropped the phone in his haste to answer. "Andre, it's Catherine Wilson." "Hello, Ms. Wilson." He tried to keep his voice steady. "I'm calling with good news," she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "We'd like to offer you the Associate Director of Community Integration position we discussed. The team was very impressed with your background and ideas." Relief and excitement washed over him. "Thank you. I'm thrilled to accept." "Wonderful," Catherine said. "We'd like you to start on Monday if that works for you. We can handle the paperwork first thing, and then get you up to speed on the River's Edge project." "Monday is perfect," Andre replied, already mentally calculating what he needed to do to prepare. "Great. And I understand you're meeting with my mother tomorrow about her garden project?" Andre laughed. "News travels fast." "Mom keeps me updated on all her schemes," Catherine said with obvious affection. "Just so you know, that's entirely separate from your position here. You're under no obligation." "I'm happy to help," Andre assured her. "I love community gardens. They bring people together in a way few other things can." After they hung up, Andre did a little victory dance around his apartment. After months of searching rejection letters and interviews that went nowhere, he finally had a job, and not just any job, but one that aligned perfectly with his values and ambitions. His first instinct was to call his mother and share the good news, but as he reached for the phone, he paused. First, he wanted to thank the person who had made this possible. He dialed Eleanor's number. "Hello?" Her voice was warm and slightly curious. "Eleanor, it's Andre. I just got off the phone with Catherine." "I got the job." "Oh, wonderful," Eleanor exclaimed. "Though I'm not surprised. Catherine told me you impressed everyone." "I wouldn't have had the chance without you," Andre said sincerely. "You didn't have to put in a good word for me, especially after I'd just met you." "I can't thank you enough." "Nonsense," Eleanor replied. "I simply recognized something special and made sure Catherine saw it too. The rest was all you, dear." They chatted for a few minutes about the position and his start date, and then Eleanor said, "I'm even more pleased now that you're coming tomorrow. We can celebrate your new job while we look at our sad little garden space." Saturday morning dawned clear and bright. Andre arrived at Oak Ridge Senior Living Complex 10 minutes early, dressed casually in jeans and a t-shirt with a notebook tucked under his arm. The complex was nicer than he had expected, not the sterile, hospital-like environment he had imagined, but a cluster of attractive apartment buildings surrounding shared green spaces and community areas. Eleanor was waiting for him in the lobby, chatting animatedly with two other elderly residents. When she spotted him, her face lit up. "Here he is," she announced to her companions. "The garden expert I was telling you about." Andre felt a moment of panic. "I wouldn't call myself an expert. Compared to us, you're a master gardener," said one of the other seniors, a tall man with a friendly smile. I can barely keep a houseplant alive. Eleanor made quick introductions. The tall man was Robert, a retired high school principal, and the woman beside him was Gladys, who had worked as a nurse for 40 years. They were part of what Eleanor called her garden committee, though from their self-deprecating comments, none of them had much gardening experience. We've been trying to get a community garden started for almost a year, Eleanor explained as she led the group outside to a sunny patch of lawn behind the main building. The management finally approved it last month, but we're a bit lost on how to actually make it happen. The space was about 30 feet by 40 feet, currently just an empty lawn bordered by a few scattered shrubs, but Andre immediately saw its potential. Good southern exposure, nearby water access, and enough room for a decent number of raised beds. This is perfect, he said, walking the perimeter. You could easily fit 15 to 20 raised beds here, plus a small seating area. The seniors exchanged excited glances. Raised beds would be ideal, Gladys said. Many of us can't kneel or bend easily anymore. Andre nodded, already sketching a rough layout in his notebook. We could build them at different heights, too, so people in wheelchairs could access some of them. For the next hour, Andre walked the committee through the basics of setting up a community garden, soil requirements, bed construction, irrigation options, and suitable plants for beginners. The seniors peppered him with questions which he answered patiently, enjoying their enthusiasm. The biggest challenge will be building the beds, Robert said, looking doubtful. None of us are exactly handy with power tools these days. Andre thought for a moment. What if we made it a community project? Invite families from the neighborhood to help build them? It could be a way to connect Oak Ridge with the surrounding community. Eleanor's eyes sparkled. I love that idea. We've been wanting to find ways to be more involved with our neighbors rather than being isolated here. That's exactly the kind of integration we're focusing on at Westside, Andre said, warming to the subject. Communities work better when different generations and groups connect and support each other. As they continued to plan, more residents drifted over to join the conversation. Soon Andre was surrounded by a dozen seniors, all offering ideas and asking questions. What had started as a simple garden consultation was evolving into something much larger, a potential partnership between Oak Ridge and the surrounding neighborhood. Later, Eleanor insisted that Andre join her and several others for lunch in the complex's dining room. As they ate, the conversation shifted from gardening to broader community issues. The lack of transportation options for seniors, the need for more intergenerational programs, the isolation many older adults felt. You know, Eleanor said thoughtfully, this garden project could be a pilot for the kind of work you'll be doing at Westside, a small-scale test case for community integration. Andre nodded slowly, seeing the connections. You're right, and it could provide valuable data for the larger projects we're planning. Why don't you bring some of your colleagues here once you've settled into your job? Robert suggested. Let them see what we're trying to do. That's a great idea, Andre agreed. Catherine mentioned you've been pushing Westside toward more intergenerational programming, he said to Eleanor. This could be a perfect example, Eleanor smiled mysteriously. That's been my little crusade for years. Seniors have so much to offer, experience, time, wisdom, and younger generations have energy and fresh perspectives. Bringing them together benefits everyone. By the time Andre left Oak Ridge that afternoon, what had started as a simple garden consultation had transformed into a potential partnership between the senior complex and Westside CDC. He had a notebook full of ideas, a list of contacts, and a sense of excitement about the possibilities. As he drove home, he reflected on the remarkable chain of events that had led him here. Just a few days ago, he had been a job seeker caught in the rain, making a split-second decision to help an elderly woman with her groceries. Now he had a promising new job, a community project that excited him, and connections with people who shared his vision for stronger, more integrated communities. When he arrived home, there was a text message waiting from Catherine. Mom just called. Extremely excited about the garden project and your ideas for neighborhood integration. I think you've made a fan for life. See you Monday, and be prepared to tell the team about this potential collaboration with Oak Ridge. Andre smiled as he replied, looking forward to it. I think this could be the beginning of something special. That evening, as he prepared for his first day at Westside CDC, Andre thought about his grandmother, who had passed away 3 years ago. She had always told him that kindness had a way of multiplying, that a single good deed could set off a chain reaction that touched many lives. At the time, he had thought it was just something nice that grandmothers said. Now he was living proof that sometimes the smallest actions, like stopping to help someone in the rain, could change the course of not just one life, but potentially many. Monday morning couldn't come soon enough. 3 months later, Andre stood at the edge of the Oak Ridge Senior Living Complex garden, marveling at the transformation. What had once been an empty patch of lawn was now a thriving community space. 15 raised garden beds in various heights formed the heart of the area, bursting with vegetables, herbs, and flowers. A small gazebo provided shade for the seating area, where several seniors were chatting with young families. Children darted between the beds asking questions about the plants and proudly showing off the ones they had helped grow. Hard to believe this all started with a rainstorm and some groceries, isn't it? Eleanor appeared beside him, looking pleased as she surveyed the scene. Andre smiled warmly at her. In the months since their chance meeting, Eleanor had become not just a colleague but a dear friend. Sometimes I still can't believe how everything worked out. I can, Eleanor said confidently. Good people eventually find each other. The universe makes sure of it. The garden opening celebration was in full swing. Residents from the surrounding neighborhood mingled with the seniors from Oak Ridge, sharing food, stories, and gardening tips. A local news crew was interviewing Catherine about Westside CDC's role in supporting the project. Andre's 3-month trial period at Westside had flown by in a whirlwind of activity. The River's Edge development was moving forward with his community integration approach at its center. He had established focus groups with local residents, created partnerships with nearby schools and businesses, and designed spaces specifically for intergenerational activities. "Your mom is quite the gardener," a voice said behind them. Andre turned to see Robert approaching with a young boy of about 8 who was clutching a small potted tomato plant. "My grandson Michael," Robert explained proudly. "He's been helping me with my garden bed every weekend. Turns out the kid has quite the green thumb." The boy grinned, showing a missing front tooth. "Grandpa lets me water the plants and pick the tomatoes. We're growing the best ones in the whole garden." Eleanor laughed. "Is that so? I think my squash might give your tomatoes some competition." As Robert and his grandson continued on their tour of the garden, Andre felt a deep satisfaction. This was exactly what he had envisioned. Not just plants growing, but relationships forming across generations. "Oh, there's Lisa from the planning department," Eleanor said, waving to a woman who had just arrived. "I need to talk to her about the zoning for the new senior housing project." "Excuse me, dear." Andre watched as Eleanor made her way through the crowd, greeting everyone by name, moving with an energy that belied her 77 years. Her enthusiasm for community work hadn't diminished with age. If anything, it had grown stronger. "Your mentor is a force of nature," said a familiar voice. Catherine Wilson joined him, handing him a glass of lemonade. "She certainly is," Andre agreed. "Though I'm not sure if I'm mentoring her or she's mentoring me at this point," Catherine laughed. "Mom has that effect on people. But seriously, the board is incredibly impressed with what you've accomplished these past 3 months. The River's Edge project is already being talked about as a model for future developments." "It's been a team effort," Andre said modestly. "True, but your vision has been driving it," Catherine replied, "which is why I wanted to talk to you today." She gestured toward a quieter corner of the garden. Once they were seated on a bench beneath a young apple tree planted by Eleanor and Andre. During the garden's construction, Catherine continued, "As you know, your trial period ends next week." Her expression was serious, but her eyes were warm. "The board met yesterday to discuss your performance and the future of the associate director position." Andre nodded, feeling a flutter of nervousness despite the positive feedback he'd received throughout his time at Westside. "I'm pleased to tell you that the board has voted unanimously to make your position permanent," Catherine said with a smile. "Furthermore, they've approved an expanded budget for the Community Integration Department. You'll be able to hire 2 full-time staff members to support your work." Relief and excitement washed over Andre. "That's fantastic news. Thank you for your confidence in me." "You've earned it," Catherine assured him. "The collaboration with Oak Ridge has been particularly impressive. This garden project has already inspired 3 other senior living facilities to reach out to us about similar initiatives." Andre glanced around at the vibrant scene before them, children helping seniors harvest vegetables, neighbors exchanging recipes, community members of all ages and backgrounds finding common ground in the simple act of growing things together. There's something special about gardens, he reflected. My grandmother always said they're one of the few places where age and background don't matter. Everyone can contribute something valuable. Speaking of contributing, Catherine said, her expression turning thoughtful. There's one more thing the board discussed. We're launching a leadership development program for community members interested in urban planning and development. We'd like you to lead it. Andre looked at her in surprise. Me? I've only been with Westside for 3 months. Yes, but you bring a perspective we need more of in this field, Catherine explained. You understand both the technical aspects of planning and the human impact of development decisions. That's rare and valuable. Before Andre could respond, they were interrupted by a commotion near the gazebo. Eleanor was standing on a chair, despite Robert's concern, hovering nearby and clinking a spoon against a glass to get everyone's attention. If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment, she called out. The crowd quieted. I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate our community garden opening. This project has been a dream of mine for years, but it wouldn't have happened without all of you. She gestured around at the gathered community members, especially our neighbors who helped build these beautiful garden beds, the children who planted seeds and pulled weeds, and of course, the wonderful team at Westside CDC who provided support and expertise. Her gaze found Andre in the crowd and she smiled warmly, particularly one young man who stopped to help an old woman with her groceries during a rainstorm a few months ago, not knowing that simple act of kindness would lead to all of this. Andre felt his cheeks warm as people turned to look at him. Eleanor continued, They say a garden teaches us about life, how small seeds can grow into something beautiful with proper care and attention. But I think it also teaches us about community. Different plants growing together, supporting each other, creating something more beautiful than any single plant could alone. She raised her glass. So here's to our garden, to our community, and to the power of simple kindness to change lives. May we continue to grow together for many years to come. As the crowd applauded and raised their glasses, Andre felt a lump form in his throat. From where he stood, he could see the full sweep of what had grown from that rainy day encounter. Not just the physical garden with its neat rows of vegetables and bright flowers, but the web of connections that had formed around it. There was Robert and his grandson, their bond strengthened through their weekend gardening sessions. There were the young parents from the neighborhood, who had initially come just to help build the beds but now brought their children regularly to learn from the seniors. There were the Westside CDC staff members who had found inspiration for other projects through their involvement here. And at the center of it all was Eleanor, who had seen something in Andre that day in the rain, not just someone who could help with her groceries, but a kindred spirit who shared her vision for what communities could be. After the toast, people drifted back to their conversations and activities. Eleanor made her way over to where Andre and Catherine were sitting. Quite a speech, Mom, Catherine said with affection, though I wish you wouldn't stand on chairs at your age. Eleanor waved away her concern. If I can't stand on a chair at 77, when can I? Besides, I wanted everyone to see what we've accomplished here. It is pretty amazing, Andre agreed, looking around again at the garden and the people enjoying it. And it's just the beginning, Eleanor said, her eyes bright with plans. I've been talking with the elementary school about bringing classes here for science lessons. And Robert wants to start a weekly story time for HOA.